Okay, put a ticket in here. Okay then, let me know.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Hi. I wasn't sure if that link actually
Oh
worked.
no, I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me? Let's see. I should be.
Oh, let me see. Here's the mute.
I
Can
should
you hear
be.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Let me see. Maybe it's. Let me check my mic, okay?
Good.
See.
I've had problems with Google apps not being able to hear the person on the other end, so I'm a little bit
Oh,
nervous.
okay. I wasn't sure if it was that.
Um,
Let me see.
can you use the chat to
Sure.
let me know what you're saying?
Okay. Well, let's
Put
see
my settings
here.
on. Display audio. Da, da, da.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, everything's in Spanish.
Oh, is it in Spanish on this one? I mean, that's weird. It should be it it should be your.
Okay, I can't hear you is my problem.
Oh, okay. 'Cause I can hear you. I
And
can
I'm
hear you.
thinking it might be something with my system because last time I had to Google Hangout with people, I couldn't hear them at all.
Oh wow. Let's see. But it could be me. It could be me.
Now it's
Let's see. Let me just check mine, okay? Let's see. All right. So I can hear myself. Let's see. Let's
I'm
see.
just looking, trying to
Yep.
troubleshoot this.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're actually we are live. So yeah. Look at your 701. Wow. See. But I
This
need
doesn't answer.
here a second. I want to make sure other people are here. Let me Oh, here you go. So let me put that.
Okay.
So
Is there anybody else here in this Hangout?
not yet, not yet. Let's see. Um,
Okay. I know that a few people from the Kids Listen group were planning on it. We were just talking about it. Our problem is I can't hear you. It's hard to have a conversation when we can't hear.
David.
Let's try changing the settings on our... Hi, David.
Well, let's see if David can hear me, then we'll know.
Okay. Let's see how... see
you get it?
David and if he is able to talk.
Mhm. Hey, David,
Okay. Hi, David.
hey, David, can you hear us?
Okay, I think it's on our end.
Let's
Let me
see.
reset our system and just have it come out of the
David, hi, David.
regular display audio sound output.
Hi, David. Yeah, I see David talking about it. Oh,
Okay. I can hear them.
oh, here we go.
Oh, here's what's wrong.
You got something?
Okay. Did you see
You
that?
got something?
Hello.
Hi.
Okay.
You figured out the sound? I can't
Okay,
hear
now we can hear you. My output volume on my computer was just
okay.
all the way down for sound.
Why don't you go back to the Zoom, babe?
Okay.
Yeah. And I see David there, but I can't hear him either. So, hey.
Okay, you might want to check your mic preferences.
Well, I think that's David's mic, yeah. David, can you check your mic, David? And did you had what is this? All right. So now,
This is not coming through the Zoom when it's selected.
so we have to make sure that whoever's going to join us has this link from the Hangout, and then we should be good to go. We can start ASAP here. I see a Twitter chat going on, and I wanted to tweet these out also.
It's very strange.
I know.
Yeah, so you guys can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then David, I see David in the Hangout, but I don't.
Yeah.
He's talking, but I guess it's
Because there's feedback.
Because
or you guys have feedback on from me?
we have
Yeah.
Google Hangouts have not been my friend. Okay, let's just do internal speakers. Hello, can you hear us now?
Yeah, we can keep hearing that.
Okay, let's use
It's not changing.
Well, then why is it? Oh, it's output.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yes. I can hear you.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
We
David,
don't.
Paul, and David, can you say that? Can you hear us, David? Yes, keep talking, but you can. I didn't hear you.
The preferences aren't changing.
Our preferences aren't changing?
No. I don't think so.
You only have one computer, right? It's not like two.
I'm not hearing feedback anymore.
Okay.
So either way, I don't know where the sound is coming in, but it's better.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine since when you first came in. Okay. So I can hear you guys are using two mics?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they come in clearly, both. Okay, and then the event link is at the top, or the one you use. So if you know anyone else that is going to come in, you can give them that link. You can copy and give them that link. I put it in the Google event page also. I saw some people. Saw some people in here. I can hear you. I say Pam's there. So hi Pam. And so. So this week, some people are actually listening live from the Google event page.
Okay.
Google Hangout page and Google Plus page, and so they're listening live, and I left the link there so if anyone wants to join us in the Hangout, and hopefully David can talk. But I think it is past 9 o'clock Central, so we might want to start soon. And this is being recorded. It's a Google Hangout on air, and so we can do a podcasting magic and make it nice.
Okay. I hope we cut the part where we're just figuring out our technical settings.
We can. on our end when we publish. But just to get a confirmation, David, you can hear us fine inside the Hangout? Oh, here comes Peggy. Hi, Peggy. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, hi, Peggy. Welcome to the Hangout.
Oops.
There's Peggy right there.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning. I keep clicking and unclicking things because I can't read the Spanish.
Oh, sorry about that. I didn't realize that I used the profile mainly for my Google Hangouts, so I didn't realize everything was in Spanish. My bad at this end. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with a quick intro because it is past the podcast. So just a quick introduction. My name is Joa Davis, and I'm a fifth grade teacher in Los Angeles. And today is July the 30th, actually on 9 a.m. Central. And this is part of EdCampGlobal 2016. And we are here in this session called entitled Kidcasts or podcast for kids. And so as part of this EdCamp, it's kind of an open forum for us to share ideas around educational technology and this idea of podcasting, and how it's used, different podcasts are used in the classroom. So why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves and we'll go from there. So how about to my left is Peggy. You want to start, Peggy, and then we'll go to Lindsay and David.
Sure, I'll just say a quick hello. My name is Peggy George, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a retired elementary school principal and university pre-service instructor, and I have been a fan of Joe's for many, many years, and know that he has been a fan of podcasting with students for a very long time, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation and hearing what he's up to now.
Hello.
A future podcaster.
Yes. This is morning time, so this is we're sort of balancing our 2-year-old at the same time. So I'm Lindsay, and this is Marshall.
Hello.
And we host Tumble, which is a science podcast for kids, and we have listeners as young as 2 and as old as however old people who listen to podcasts are. And our podcast is really perfect for 5th and 6th grade, whether you're in a science classroom or not. So, Marshall, I'm getting distracted.
He's desperately trying to clear. Do you want to give me the guy?
Yeah.
He might be less able to destroy things.
So we started the podcast about 2 years ago, and since then we've heard from a lot of teachers who are using the podcast classroom, and we're really excited about finding out more ways to collaborate with teachers and create resources that...
Okay.
Okay, Marshall's going to help him out. Yes, so we're interested in collaborating with teachers, creating educational resources that they can use on top of Tumble, and just very interested in finding out ways that teachers want to use podcasts in the classroom and how we can into something better and better.
Awesome. And David, can you chime in? Let's see if we can hear you. Yeah, we're not getting sound from David. Can you check your mic, David? Not yet. Yeah, we're not getting sound from David, I don't think. So, yeah, if you can check your mic, David, I think you might be silent. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and continue. I know we do have, I do have some listeners right now on the event page. So I did tweet it out. We're using EdCampGlobal ECG 2016 as a hashtag for this event, and also we're using a separate hashtag, Kidcasts. So if you want to come in, the link is there for those that are listening live. It's on the event page. And so, I also tweeted out on Twitter with the two hashtag. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and then we'll go from here. So as part of EdCampGlobal, it's we join as educators, and we come in and we discuss topics that are important to us, right? And in this open forum, I thought of bringing up how podcasting is used in the classroom, and as an educator, as an elementary school teacher, looking for resources and things that I can do with my own students. And you mentioned, Lindsey, the fifth and sixth grade classroom, and it is really difficult or hard to find resources out there for us to use, especially in science. So that was my motivation, and this whole idea of Kidcast or a podcast that is specifically designed for use in the classroom. And so we're looking at a lot of, well, actually, not a lot of, so I guess that's my starting point. And so maybe we can start with that. If Lindsey, you want to jump in with, what was this motivation to start with producing podcasts specifically for students and looking at science as a starting point?
Sure. So why produce podcasts for kids? I think it started from it just being really fun to produce radio for kids. My background is as a science producer for kids and a science radio producer for kids. And Marshall is a middle school and high school teacher. Mm-hmm. So we were really able to combine our professional knowledge to create Tumble. And in my time looking at how science is being reported and disseminated through radio, there just wasn't a lot of science materials for kids. Everything is aimed at kind of an 8th grade level in general, but it didn't take into account any of the sensitivities that kid audiences have and what their interests are. So I saw a real opportunity to create something that didn't exist in a wide and discoverable way, and that it was something that would really wanted. Oh, here's Kitty. Hello.
Wait, I have to hang up on this.
Okay. Hello.
So, just joining us in the final season of the producing for one of these podcasts for kids, or Kidcasts, and Lindsey was going over why do we produce podcasts for kids, and I'm actually one of the consumers and listeners of podcasts. So, you want to continue, Lindsey, and then we'll go with a quick introduction from Kitty as soon as we finish that.
Can you say more about what Tumble is?
Sure. Tumble, we focus on stories behind science discovery. So it's very much a storytelling podcast. And each episode, we sort of start with kids' own curiosity, take a question from kids, and where we go from that is not just into, what are science facts. It's how does the process of science work.
Nice.
Something we feel is lacking in science education now, that there's not as much time to explore how science works and the ways that it's not just we didn't know this and now we do this and now we do know this. It's more, there's a very human story, and as somebody who did not enjoy science as a student, and I actually didn't get into science until I had my first interview with a living, breathing scientist. It was really important for me to start communicating that to kids, that they missed something, that they were missing something like I was missing something too, and that it's so important to be whether or not you're going to grow up as a scientist or engineer, it's so important to understand science as an informed citizen of the world. So everything that we do sort of guides that. We want to have a combination of, science that is really fun and exciting and inspiring, and also have some sort of lesson about what is the underlying process, because that's something that teachers I know don't have a lot of opportunity to cover.
Yeah, great. And so here we have in our Google Hangout today, just a reminder, this is part of EdCamGlobal 2016. Again, my name is Joe Rodriguez, and here we have a group of educators, podcasters, and everyone else joining us, and we're exploring that idea of Kidcasts or podcast for kids. And so in our call, just joining us, we have Kitty Feldrich. And so, Kitty, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I started off in the world of public broadcasting and did a talk show in Los Angeles for many years, and we would show up at the LA Times Festival of Books, and all these people would say, "Oh, we love your show," and they'd be dragging these kids with them, and they go, "Well, we listen to you too," and I go, "There's no way you listen to my show. There is nothing on my show for you." And they would say, "Well, I'm trapped in my mom's carpool. I have to listen to your show." So we had this conversation about, well, what would you like to listen to? What would be of interest to you? Well, we were at a book festival, so books was the topic. And so once a month, we throw all the adults out of the studio and only invite the kids in. And we would talk about a book of the month. We would have an interview with the author. They would be listening in on the other end of the phone, and then they would join the conversation. And because it was a radio station and everybody was hawking books and movies, and we were in Los Angeles, all kinds of celebrities were coming in and out of the studio. So we would grab one of them at one point in time that month and have them read from the book. And so that was what we did on radio. And then we moved to cable television. And then when I moved to Washington to do Capitol Hill stuff, I just didn't have any time. But July of last year, I rebirthed Book Club for Kids as a podcast because the technology was there to do it from literally where I'm at right now, my living room. And so we've worked with kids in the D.C., Virginia, Maryland area, New Jersey. We've taped shows in California and in Illinois. So we're really, and we've found a way to do it remotely. So even if I physically can't be there, your kids can be on the air on the show. So it's the same format. It's 20 minutes. It's kids talking about a book. It's mostly their voices because I feel like it's so important to hear from them. And we target middle grade, which I sort of broadly define as between 5th and 9th grade, because these are kids who can talk about more than just plot. They can talk about how the book relates to their lives, and the conversation is much more rich. Let me see, middle graders, and I think that's it.
Awesome. And so, yeah, as we look at this idea of a podcast and we look at the why, right? And I put in the promo that I did, because kids listen anyway, whether if it's in the carpool lane or it's as part of any other experience with their parents. But I'm really intrigued, this idea of using podcasts in the classroom. So I'll give you a little bit of my perspective, and you guys can jump in with any comments or questions. And so, as a classroom teacher, right, I'm always looking for ways to engage my students and at the same time, empower their learning and podcasting or any kind of content actually, any kind of content with, you mentioned Book Club for Kids, you mentioned science, looking at science curricular units. So I guess my question would be, what are some ideas to start incorporating this media into our own classrooms? So we have the why, but so I guess the question is the how. How can I start using it as a classroom teacher? So Kitty or Lindsey, if you want to jump in, or Peggy, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Lindsey, go ahead.
That's a big question that we want to know. I can just share what I've heard from teachers who have used our podcast in the classroom. One of them just used it during handwriting practice where kids were they're doing busy work that doesn't necessarily involve interaction, but they can listen to something. And so it's sort of an ambient way to bring science and or whatever other kind of subject you want into the classroom without necessarily having to put aside, well, we have this much time to talk about science, and then that launches into, well, what what do we know about bats in our area? And it has created conversations where kids want to do more research about what else, how it applies to them, what they can do locally, and also come up with questions that they would want to find out. And then I've also heard that it could be used for a listening station. And again, I don't know too much about this, but I know that there is a standard for listening skills that is often hard to achieve when you're doing so many other things at the same time. And so if you're able to incorporate podcasts, you can fulfill that listening requirements and have your kids practice listening without, again, putting aside, like, this is listening time. So you're getting both things at the same time. But I really, our big question is, how can we make science or podcasts for kids even more compatible with the classroom?
I have three things that we've discovered. One is a librarian told me this. A lot of the kids in this particular school, all got iPads. And they weren't quite sure how to use them, and so she suggested, and we've been doing this, is creating a QRL code for each podcast episode per book. And then what we do is suggest, if people have that kind of technology, portable technology, that they print out a copy of the code and paste it on the back of the physical book that's in the library itself. So a kid can literally point his device or her device at the book, listen to the podcast, and my gosh, you got the book in your hand. You're going to check it out right there and then. So that was a real specific way that librarians are using this. A more general way is when kids, for example, in DC are all discussing Laurie Hulse Anderson's Chains next year. And so it's a way to kick off conversations about this book because we've done a podcast on that particular book. But another librarian wants to do podcasts herself, and so what she has done is use our podcast as a model for how kids could create their own. And the technology is there right now. All you really need is a smartphone and a laptop, because all the technology for editing is free. It's a fairly easy thing once you teach kids how to do this.
Right. And there's a kid who has his own science podcast called The Show About Science, and his dad was showing me that there's an app called Spreaker where, his dad's a podcast producer, so he makes like a fairly professional sounding podcast, but the 6-year-old can just take his app and record himself and then automatically publish it. It is literally that easy. So I think I have seen a couple of examples of podcasts that have been made in the classroom, and I think it's getting easier and easier to do.
Yeah, I think as a classroom teacher myself.
Oops, we lost you. Can't hear you. Joe?
Can you also, maybe can you hear me now? Or?
Barely, yeah.
Okay, well,
Clear.
Maybe it's on my end, sorry.
That's okay. As a classroom teacher and looking at you talked about some of the studies, and one of the biggest things is in studying the topic and looking at listening comprehension. So I think when students are able to listen to a podcast, if environmental sound or if it's just in the classroom, or specifically in a center, like a classroom library center, then there is a way to engage it or to use it in the classroom. And so, I guess those were kind of my ideas. But even more specifically, is using maybe a guide, a listening guide, and then or a response guide to the actual content. And so, I mean, that's how I see it, especially in science. Or a lot of the and I'm coming into a school this year that's really high on or advocates for the readers workshop. So at your podcast, book clubs for kids, I mean that would be an awesome way to integrate. And so the idea here, at least that I wanted to explore in this event today, is we have podcasts that are produced specifically for students, and we're looking at professional kind of productions, right? And then we also have another kind of sphere where students and teachers are producing podcasts for kind of local consumption or to share out classroom learning. I guess what I wanted to ask you, Lindsay, and I'm really curious about is this idea of kids listen and bringing together podcasting, specifically for promoting podcasting for kids listen. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where is that going?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last part of your question.
So, thinking about kids listen, can you tell us about kids listen and where do you see this group, or what do you see this idea of promoting Kidcasts for kids going?
Yeah,
Hear that.
so I think he asked about Kids Listen and where we see it going. And I think Kids Listen started as a response to the thing that you talked about in the video to begin with. It's really hard to discover kids' podcasts because, number one, not too many people know that kids' podcasts exist. That's huge to begin with. Everybody knows that podcasts for adults exist. Nobody's like, I wonder if they make these for adults. So I often see questions on Twitter that, are there podcasts for kids under 7 years old? And we just have a big discovery problem because podcasts for kids are hooked into kids and family categories, which have a lot of adults parenting or even educational or craft content. We're just all mixed in there. So it's hard to find one place to go to see what is a podcast that is specifically made for children and their ages without, wondering, do I have to screen this beforehand? So when I was starting up Tumble, I tried to, hear from a lot of kids and parents who listen to podcasts with their kids, and that was a lot of the trouble, that they weren't sure what was going to be okay for their kids to listen to, even if their kids were already really into podcasts. So we decided to create Kids Listen to band together to raise awareness of the existence of podcasts for kids, and part of that is encouraging more podcasts for kids. When there are more of us, when there's more options and people are finding great podcasts, they'll be looking for more because, as adult listeners for podcasts, even though there are so many, we're always looking for new content, new ideas, new things that excite us. So we had the idea that if we all got together and raised our own visibility and helped draw other people in to giving others the resources for what it takes to make podcasts for kids versus podcasts for adults, that sort of a rising tide raises all boats. So that is the idea behind Kids Listen. And there's also a lot of internal things that we can support each other with. How do we raise our profile as individual podcasts? How can we connect more with the educational communities or whatever kinds of community we want to? And how do we make our podcast sustainable so that it makes sense to keep making podcasts for kids and we can keep ourselves alive and doing more things, like if we branch out into working more directly with schools and really having sustained resources for teachers, like the kinds of listening guides you're talking about. That's a big job. So we created Kids Listen, help each other and help ourselves achieve those goals to bring kids podcasts to a general awareness, just as there has been sort of that breakthrough moment for podcasts in general.
And I think we are at the forefront of all of this because who is the demographic for podcasts mostly? It's 20 to 35-year-olds. And, for example, with my demographic, the kids I'm working with, I have to explain what a podcast is because it's just not on their radar screen yet. And their parents really are too old, at least for my age group. I have to explain to them how to download a podcast. So, the technology, I think we're just at the front of this. I think this is really going to grow as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think that those of us who are in Kids Listen are really hearing this because there's a lot of things that we have to learn about our audience that has already been learned about adult audiences. So the first thing that we did was get together, and this was also a huge impetus for making Kids Listen in the beginning, was to create a survey in which we actually learned how do kids listen to podcasts. I'm getting feedback here.
I am too. How about I turn my mic off?
No, it's okay.
Okay, so we got over 400 responses to the survey, and we're going through and parsing through the data now to learn that kids are really unique and listen to podcasts differently than adults. For example, and this is something we heard all anecdotally from our listeners, is that kids will listen to a podcast multiple times, up to 10 times, up to until, every single time they get in the car, they want to hear the same story over and over, just as they want to listen to the same book or, watch the same movie. So that speaks to sort of a different opportunity that we have for kids to really soak in and understand the information and retain information. And kids often, they want to do things after they listen to the podcast. They want to find more information about it. They want to do activities that are related to it. And they want to engage with it in different ways. So that's, myself as an adult podcast listener, I'll never listen to the same podcast episode twice unless I'm really crazy about it. So we're in the process of learning, what are kids' audiences really like? How do they learn from podcasts? So that's really exciting stuff that we're doing with Kids Listen.
Well, great. And so here in our hangout, we have Pam Jeffrey. Pam, you want to introduce yourself? You just go from LA.
Joe, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
No, let me see. Again, I'm not sure what's up with my mic. You can really, am I coming through now?
It sounds like you're calling from the other side of a tin can.
So, Pam, do you want to introduce yourself? So wait to see if Pam. So Lindsey, I think if my audio is not too great, Kitty, you want to jump in?
Well, I would love to hear from you, Joe, and from, I don't know who Pam is, but hello, Pam, and Peggy, about what kinds of supplemental things would be helpful to you. If you had a podcast on science or on literature or on music or whatever else, what would be good for you? Because I think the thing that both Lindsey and I are struggling with is we don't have kids in school at the present time, so Common Core challenges, time of the day challenges. I learned so much going to DC public schools. For example, they get 120 minutes of reading time a week they have to fit in, but because social studies has pretty much been eliminated, they spend a lot of that reading time reading about rocks. So literature isn't even a part of their daily lives in DC public schools, which was a shock to me, which is, again, why the podcast could help them in the classroom. So I guess that's what I'm looking for, especially in LA. What are your needs? What are the kinds of things that could be useful to your teachers?
Great. And so I'll give you my perspective. I'll give you my perspective in my feminist group. My feminist group. And so I'll try to, let me see if I can do this.
So, is this better now?
That is so much better.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I just kind of unplugged this. I hope that there's not a lot of feedback. So, I'll give you my perspective. As a classroom teacher in LA, and specifically looking at books, for example, literature. And so there are a lot of more students nowadays that have access to more devices inside the classroom. And even if it's not one-to-one, there's computer centers, there's Chromebooks nowadays, or iPads. And so there are teachers using classroom portals like Google Classroom or Edmodo or other classroom spaces where they can provide specific let's say links or assignments for the students. So when I as a classroom teacher, I'm all about choice also, and choice in learning. And so part of Reader's Workshop is for students to engage, right, in learning and learning for meaning, or reading for meaning. And so that would be one of the things that I would look at. How can there be a conversation that goes, or a community of that can engage, right, and through the websites for Tumblecast or the websites for the book club for kids. How can the conversation keep going beyond the classroom? I know that specifically that literature, I look at Bookopolis, where there's a big community of people that are reviewing books, right? So how can we bring in that other media, which is in this case podcast, and being that podcast can, students can come back to. So if there's a specific episode or there's a specific idea that they want to use as part of a project, right? And so I'm looking at a resource. So if they're looking at producing some kind of product, if they're producing a presentation, or they're producing a learning outcome. And so you mentioned the QR code, which is awesome, I think. If you could, whenever you have any kind of other way to present it, either inside the classroom or at home with for parents, that's great. So that's the kind of the book club idea. Take it beyond the classroom, and then with science. I think with science, it's at least in the you mentioned not enough content available for the elementary school teachers, and so as one of the things that I've done in my classroom is called passion-based learning, or Genius Hour, and so I want kind of like almost a library of resources I can come to, and a way to get these resources out to my students. So that would be kind of the needs of the classroom teacher, and then it doesn't have to be in the classroom all the time. It could be learning that's after school, learning that's at home, learning that's on the weekend, learning that's in the car. That idea that it's portable, you can take it anywhere. And so I think that's what's great about podcasts. They're media that's recorded, and you don't have to actually look at it all the time. It can be, well, maybe you guys could talk about this, Lindsey, about this idea of using it as a resource that's when you multitask or you're doing something else. And so, but I guess that's my perspective as a classroom teacher. So any ideas there?
So that is a huge appeal of podcasts for me, that you can send it home with your kids and say, take a listen to this, and listen to it in as part of a routine that you already have in your car for a certain amount of time per day, going to school or coming home from school, going to soccer practice or whatever you're doing. You can turn that time from just, listening to music to a point where both parent and child are listening to something educational and can launch into a conversation about it later. What did you learn? Things that are just natural for you to talk about. And so I've found in surveying my own audience that most parents do use it purposefully and intentionally as an educational resource. That even though they listen to it because they're already listening to podcasts and they just want something that's appropriate for their kids, or their kid likes the stories or their kid requests it. They're aware that it is educational and that they can use it to bring more informal education into their child's lives. So the more ways that I think teachers can send that home and offer podcasts as a resource, the more, that's going to be a powerful way for more parents to understand that there are podcasts for kids, and they can present it either as an alternative to screen time or integrate it into routines that they already have. And here, he does Sparkle Stories, which are bedtime stories that have either an educational message or a lesson about how we treat other people, how we exist in the world, and their fans are very much integrating bedtimes as ways to, calm and center their kids. And it's just a part of the routine every single night. They listen to Sparkle Stories. And we've also heard that people listen to Tumble before going to bed. So there's a lot of different ways that parents can integrate podcasts in a way that's not like, watch another video. Because there are a lot of great educational videos for kids. This is another platform that I think encourages the imagination and engages kids in a slightly different way, exercising a different part of their brain.
And it's so funny, coming from Los Angeles and now I'm in DC, I realize now how much of my life in LA, particularly, is spent in the car. I mean, really, a lot of one's life is commuting. And so, in a lot of ways, the way the book club started, I think that's its future in places where people are still dependent on their automobile. Because, LA radio, Joe, there ain't a lot out there for kids that's appropriate in the middle of the day. And they don't want to listen to classical music, and you don't want to listen to their music. So I kind of see, I hadn't even thought about this as far as specifically targeting places where people are stuck in their cars. It's different here in D.C. A lot of more people are on the metro when they aren't getting burnt up by the metro. But I keep thinking in terms of you could turn carpool, as you said, into an educational experience, into a conversation opportunity.
And I think I'm going to see if Pam can jump in. Pam, can you test your audio so you can say hi?
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, hi. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Pam. Tell us, what are your thoughts?
I work in an adaptive curriculum. I have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Some of them are, last year's class we had nonverbal to children working on fractions. So we have some that when they write, you can't read what they write, some and struggle reading. Some thinking this will be great to have podcasts so that they can have it read to them instead of me reading it all the time. I think that would be great.
I know as a teacher, I'm thinking of the idea of having resources available for my students, all the time, and not being that they have this idea of sage on the stage or taking control of the instruction. I think podcasts, just as other resources, provide a lot of ideas that are a lot of content, a different way to learn, I guess. And so if we have, we allow for time inside the classroom and for time and for choice outside the classroom, where there's so many different ideas that we can explore. And Lindsey, you mentioned the network growing with Listen for Kids and having a lot more choices out there for our students to listen. And Book Club for Kids being one of those kind of channels for kids to come in and engage with ideas. And so I guess one of the things I can take it here is a question that I would have is, now that, how can we grow a community of kids? How can we do that? I mean, because we have the adults, right? Either the parents that are accessing this content, or now we have the teachers that are starting to bring it into their class. Well, how can we build a community of kids? Any ideas on that?
That's a big question, and I think it's something that Kids Listen is trying to address. One of the big challenges of that is there's no safe place for kids to go and find podcasts, because those podcasts live in kids and family, and there's a lot of very inappropriate and sometimes marked explicit content for adults in parenting topics. So you would never want to send your kid into, go find a podcast in kids and family. Although I did talk to one 10-year-old who had found our podcast on her own, and I think she's probably the only one who's ever been handed an iPod and said, go find this. And she found it for a limited time. We had on the front page kids and family favorites that Tumble was on. So she could pick out of those. So it's creating some sort of space where parents can send their kids to, what's interesting, whether that's an app or a website or a community. That's something that has yet to be created, because right now there's just not a space for kids to connect with podcasts, and we have to think about it how do we do this in a way that's safe for them? And that's much more complicated than creating a podcast community for adults.
And Joe, are you talking about how to get kids to find the podcast, or are you talking about afterwards creating a community of conversation?
Where they'll talk, yeah.
I think it's let me unmute.
Oh, you're muted now.
Sorry.
I can't hear you. Oh, there we go.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, there are two parts to that question or idea. That first, how do we get them to listen to podcasts? The motivational part, or just finding the podcast, like Lindsey mentioned. But beyond that, I mean, once we do have a few or an engaged community, for example, the book club for kids community, even if it's a small kind of community there, how can we facilitate the conversation with them? Is it inside the book club for kids blog, or is it on Twitter, or I guess I'll let you answer that, Kitty, and then I had another idea there too.
Well, I just wanted to ask you what technology your kids use to communicate. And just let me put a little thing in front of that, which is we also want to deal with adult permission. Mm-hmm. For example, for kids to appear on the show, they have to have permission from parents or librarians or teachers. So I think one of the challenges is that privacy challenge about communicating with kids directly without some kind of adult filter in between.
Yeah.
My students would be listening to podcasts if it's inside the classroom with a device from the school. It's either through the teacher computer, if it's with the speakers straight out, or if it's any other time throughout the day where they're in independent learning or cooperative learning or centers, and they're listening through there. And so, are there opportunities for partnerships with school districts, opportunities with partnership with organizations like Edmodo? Maybe, I know that a lot of the learning management systems nowadays try to incorporate apps, or try to incorporate learning systems, and so are there opportunities there that you guys see with maybe with a school district or with an organization like Edmodo? For me, that would be a starting point, because or even Google. I'm not sure about Google Classroom doesn't incorporate apps into it, but so that would be my big starting point with my students.
I would love to connect kids in LA with kids in Virginia. You know what I mean? Even if it were just two classrooms reacting to a podcast so they can talk to each other. I mean, I would be all for facilitating that. I will confess, I'm a techno nerd, because, for the first 10 minutes while you guys were trying to fiddle with the technology, I was listening to all of that, but I was on Google Plus, not realizing I should have been on Google Hangouts. So you know what I mean? I'm learning all of this like an idiot at, so that I would love to do that. I just don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah, I think it's a big question that really requires schools, teachers, the ed tech community to work with podcasts for kids, because I think there's sort of a disconnect of what are people using in the classroom and how can we integrate podcasts with what we're doing now and where we're putting it, and the traditional outlets for podcasts for kids just not being really kid friendly. So I think the more that we can bring those two sides together, and I hope that this is what this conversation is doing, is understanding what you're working with and how we can fit into that and make awareness of podcasts as a medium spread a lot more quickly than individual teachers having to figure out for themselves how are they going to use it, how are they going to access it, and how are they even going to find material that works within their classroom.
And I think maybe even an idea would be, even in this event, right, the EdCamp, maybe, and we explore this. I've been part of a K-12 online conference for many years, and we explored this idea of student voice. So where does student voice come in? And maybe even having a strand within a meetup, right? If it's a physical meetup or if it's a virtual meetup like this EdCamp is, and then having a space for students to interact in a safe environment. And I know the whole thing of the whole idea of safety and the whole idea of parent permissions, and if it's sponsored by maybe a school district, or if it's co-facilitated or by an educational institution, maybe that'll help out with that part of it. And if it's inside the school day, like you mentioned, connecting classrooms, and then maybe this partnerships with Google Education, where we can, or Skype for Education, where classrooms can connect, and then the permissions would go directly through the local teachers themselves. I know, Peggy, you've been part of this for a long time. Any thoughts on that?
Actually, I have quite a few thoughts, because you've gone in a lot of different directions, and I really like what you're suggesting about organizing communities of learning around content, whatever that may be, and the topic today is podcasts. But I think that there's a big difference between consuming content and creating it. And I really do think that to really get the kids engaged, like you said from the beginning, Joe, they have to have some choice in what they're learning, and everything kind of sounds like the teacher's making the choice about the content they're going to set up for the students to engage with, whether it's in a learning center or whether it's a homework assignment or something that everybody's going to listen together and then have a conversation about. And there are obviously tons of places they can get information about things, but it's how you engage them with that content that's going to make a difference. And that's where I think the creation comes in. And I've heard lots of kids' podcasts over the years, and the ones I really enjoyed were the ones where the kids were talking to other kids about what they were learning, doing, reading. They might give a book review. They might give we did this great science project today, and this is what we found out, things like that. And other kids want to talk about that when they hear kids saying it. So I I would be a huge fan of wanting to see kids create their own podcasts in response to maybe a podcast that they've heard. You know, I love the book club idea that you were talking about, where you brought in the authors into your content, and kids love to do that too. And there's so many teachers that are using Skype now to connect authors with the students in their class so that they can really have a conversation about not only the book, but how do you start becoming a writer, those kinds of things. So I'll turn it back to you and get responses from all of you, but I just am such a huge fan of podcasting, and I would love to see it much more than consuming.
Absolutely, and I'll jump in really fast. Yes, I mean, that would be the outcome. I mean, I know one of the projects that I'm going to work on for 2016, 2017 is Kids Radio LA, and which is basically my classroom's response to all the learning that's going on. And it could be, you know, the Tumblecast, you know, podcast. It could be the book club for kids. It could be anything that we're learning, and then our response to that learning in a kind of a consistent format throughout the school year. But I know that we're kind of jumping into the later part of the hour, and this is an event, again, a reminder to all of us that are listening that this is EdCampGlobal 2016, and our conversation here today about Kidcasts, or podcasts for kids. And so I'm going to, we do have to start wrapping it up. I'm going to turn it back to you guys. My question here would be, how can we keep this going? How can we keep this conversation going regarding the podcast and the importance of podcasts for students, either as a consuming thing to learn and to research, but also maybe perhaps a production part. So let's do that. Let's do kind of a final round. So if you, Lindsey, you want to start us off?
So Kids Listen is a great resource and a place that definitely wants to have a sustained and very in-depth conversation with teachers so that we all can, you know, have this knowledge and engage in different ways with teachers. So we have a newsletter. If you go to kidslisten.org, you can sign up. You can also fill out a membership application. You don't have to have a podcast to join Kids Listen. We're just looking for people who want to play an active role in encouraging a healthy ecosystem of kids podcasts. And so teachers are a huge part of that. And we just opened our application process, so we're working working through that now. And you can also share, you know, on Twitter we have the hashtag KidsListen. So if people are using podcasts in the classroom, want to connect with us, with podcasters, I know that Tumble really wants to connect and have feedback so that we can develop resources for teachers to use in the classroom. So those conversations are really important to us. So, you know, to recap, and I'm sorry about any background toddler noise, it's, you know, check out kidslisten.org, apply to be a member if you really want to engage with us, and use the hashtag KidsListen. Reach out to us on social media. We're at kids_listen. We're also on Facebook. So, yes.
I would just echo everything Lindsey said as far as podcasts in general. If you have anything specific, because quite frankly, we're all asking the same question. You know, whether we're working on music or bedtime stories or science or literature, all of us working with kids, we've craved that feedback from you guys on the front lines. And you've got the better ideas in many ways. You know, we've exhausted our supply of great ideas about how we can better serve you. But if you tell us how we can better serve you, that'd be great. And you can not only get us through Kids Listen, you can also go to Book Club for Kids if you are literaturely specifically interested.
Yeah.
I didn't say that right, but And the same thing for Tumble. If you're,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking for science, that's where you want to go.
We're at tumblecast.com, which redirects to sciencepodcastforkids.com. And you
Great.
can listen to all of our episodes there, and also, we have curated lists of resources in our blogs for each episode. And and I would be remiss to not mention that we just launched a Patreon so that we can really invest in an educational mission and create the resources for teachers to really make a lot of use of Tumble in the classroom. So that's what our Patreon is about.
Great. Pam or Peggy?
I'm looking forward to using podcasts. I've never used them before, so I'm excited about this new technology to use in my classroom for the kids. And then I'll post it on Twitter or to let you know how it's working.
Oh, let me just add one more thing. If you have kids who want to be on the show, send me an email. We'll find a way to do it remotely or in person, because I do come to LA a lot, but I don't often come to Arizona. So if there's, I might, but if you are interested, just shoot me an email and we'll make it happen.
Definitely. And so I just want to say thank you to all of our participants here in the Hangout, and also for those that came to EdCampGlobal 2016. Looking to continuing the conversation. This has been Joe Rodriguez, a 5th grade teacher in Los Angeles, California, and enjoying EdCamp and then all the different connections online. And we do invite you to subscribe to Listen for Kids and look at all the resources that are available through there, and the Tumblecast and Book Club for Kids and all the other great podcasts that are produced for kids. And then we hopefully encourage you to start your own podcast with your own students or your own kids at home. So yeah, the link is kidslisten.org. Well, thank you everyone for being part of this conversation. And looking forward to continuing with the hashtag KidsListen on Twitter and any other social media with Facebook and then I'm looking forward to connecting with Kitty for those opportunities with my own students. So yeah, so looking at Tumblecast. And all right, so thank you everyone for all of your ideas and resources for today, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the actual transmission here.
Thank
All right.